Okay, everybody, welcome to the FIA Show. What does that stand for? Fuck yeah! That's awesome. Okay. You know, I had a lunch with a friend the other day, and he's like, "There's a lot of cursing on your show." I said, "Did you happen to catch the name?" Anyways, you know what? Thank you guys for coming out. I'm Brian Hogman, Mission 35 Mortgages, and we are all about increasing your wealth. That's our really mission, our goal, increasing your wealth. And I am super pumped and excited to have Limor on my show today.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah. Everybody knows Limor already. She's a rock star. Real estate investor, financial coach, amazing background, and a wealth of financial knowledge as well too. And I saw you actually on a video with our friend Alfonso.
There you go.
Yeah. And I said, I got to meet you. You know what I mean? And I'm so glad that we reached out and connected. And
yeah, totally.
Ironically enough, that you already connected with another mortgage broker in our office.
Yes. I must say I've been having amazing service. So
yeah, he's got a good last name.
There you go.
Craigster. Awesome. So why don't you tell everybody a little bit about yourself for those who don't know? Give us a little bit of background.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I was one of those gals. I was born and I loved money. Literally, I remember being like 7 years old and going to the bank. My parents like lifting me up, and I was like, you know, giving my pennies, and my the banker would stamp my book, and you know, I had lots of dolls and toys, but like my bank book was something I checked on a regular basis.
That's awesome.
It's, I don't know, crazy to think in hindsight that it happened that early on. But I've always been super fascinated with how money worked, and you know, no surprise, when I decided I was going to go to university, I decided I was going to study business because then I could learn about money.
Yeah.
And actually a really pivotal thing that happened for me at that point in time is I wanted to do an exchange. So I chose an international business program where it was mandatory to study abroad, so my parents couldn't give me a hard time, and I was going to live in France for my whole third year.
Cool.
Now, one minor dilemma, debt was this unfathomable thing, and if I wanted to live in France for a year and travel every weekend, well, I had to save a lot of money. So I did some really wonky math and calculated that I needed about $75 a day, and I'm kind of aging myself a little bit here.
Or living on a budget.
No, it was definitely a student budget back in the day.
Totally.
But you know, for 3 years, I worked as hard as I could. You know, minimum wage, I worked summers, I worked evenings, and basically every time I was like, oh my God, I love this awesome outfit, $75, it's this, or 1 day in Europe, and I put it away. So, you know, I funded my entire third year of living abroad in Europe, and it was a fantastic year.
Good for you.
It really showed
awesome.
me the value of a dollar and what I could do if I was focused with my money. And you know, from there I went into the banking industry, surprise, surprise, figured out the inner workings of how banks made money and all the customers made mistakes. And you know, in that process I was like, okay, well, what if I started telling people the secrets so that they could stop making these silly mistakes? So it was kind of having informal workshops for anybody who would listen to me. And I was like, it's funny, at work, my team, you know, we'd have, at the end of the month, we'd have like month-end meetings or forecasts for the next month, and you know, later on in the day there'd always be a like, come ask me more money questions. So
cool.
It kind of evolved in a very, very natural way, and then found myself one day in a 3-day real estate investing seminar with my jaw on the ground for 3 days being like, holy crap, how come no one ever taught me this before? And so that weekend I spent over $20,000 invested in myself. I'm like, I have to take every class that's out there. And you know, my goal was just to have some passive income, retire in my 50s, you know, all that stuff that, you know, maybe we all aspire to, maybe not, I don't know. But once I did my first real estate deal, like, it was over. I was like, you mean I made more money than my year-end bonus? And it was stuff I created from my mind and connected the dots, and like, that's it. 2.5 years, I was done. Replaced my corporate income with real estate, and I've been on a mission to help the world be financially fabulous ever since.
That is awesome, eh? Wow. Okay, that's it. That's all we need to know. Just take that, you know. But no, that is, you know what, I love hearing your story. Our values are so much in line, because like hearing your story, I was the same when I went to university in Australia, on a budget, and really learning about sacrifice and the value of a dollar.
But didn't it not even feel like sacrifice at the time?
Well, no, it didn't, because I think when you focus on the goal,
what you really want,
then the sacrifice is not that hard.
Totally.
Right? And then immediate gratification is really not that good anyways, right? So when it's delayed gratification, it actually feels better later.
Totally.
When you earned it. Right? So you did a phenomenal coaching company for how long? You were talking about that a bit?
Yeah, I was teaching real estate investing for a major company across Canada for over 5 years. So about once every 6 weeks, once every 2 months, I would travel to another major city and have the distinct privilege of, speaking for 3 days in front of a group of people and teaching them the basics of investing. And it gave me such a great opportunity because, not only getting to teach, but then with so many of the students, I'd work with them on their live deals after the fact. In a 5-year span, felt like it gained over 100 years of real estate investing experience.
That's so cool. And I love how you took the leap leaving your corporate job, because I think a lot of us here, when we invest in real estate, the scariest thing is to do the first deal or the very first one, right? And 100%. You went in just deep and ran and got it, like your first one, and then you quit in 2 years, right? To end up replacing your income.
But I will be completely honest, I could not have done it without the support of mentors.
Yeah.
Because I was petrified, and at the same time, so there's kind of two types of people, the way I categorize it when you get started with real estate. There's those who just want to jump off the building and hope they can open their parachute as they go down, and I categorize myself there. And then there's the people who are so careful, doing analysis paralysis, trying to get all the strings of the parachute perfectly organized that they actually don't even jump off the building.
Yep.
So, for people like me, my mentor saved me from collapsing or, making some really significant mistakes. But, I know mentors can also help you to even take that first step if you're someone who's like, this sounds so great, but how do I actually do it?
Well, I think mentors get you there quicker too, right? Because I know for me, I'm kind of like you. I jumped, I landed on the ground, I was like, oh man, that really hurt. Okay. But I'll do it again, right? I'm gonna go up and maybe the chute will come out a little bit quicker next time, right? Totally. But I think learning from the mentors, it gets you to the same destination and it fast forward and eliminates 100%. A lot of the pain, right? 100%. I totally agree. Yeah. So I want to talk about the mortgage market today a little bit, right? Because one of Limor's specialties is investing in rent homes, right? Absolutely. So, and our mortgage market today is not what it was 5 years ago. It's a little bit different today.
A lot different.
Trying to be nice,
okay.
Trying to sugarcoat the mortgage market a little bit, right? Reality is we've had major mortgage rule changes every single year for the past 9 years. It's getting more and more restrictive. Something that we're seeing more and more now is the rent to own, right? Where you actually have perfectly good covenants, perfectly good people that maybe would have qualified for a mortgage a year ago, 2 years ago, but because of the stress test and new rules, they don't qualify anymore.
Yeah.
And it's like a race trying to save up money and get enough income to get approved, and it's
before the rule changes.
Yeah, just out of reach. And it's like, oh, you were almost there, but now this changed. You can't do it.
Yeah.
So I really wanted to, from your side, because we're on the broker side, arranging people to get rent homes. I want to hear from the investment side, because I think it's an under talked about investment for people.
Yeah, absolutely. So, exactly like you're saying, there's so many great people who are self-employed or they've got side hustles, so they're making money in a way that doesn't help them to qualify for the mortgage. So these are all really good people, hardworking people who just want to get into home ownership and eventually pay off a mortgage and eventually retire down the road. And so as an investor, we have an opportunity to really be the cushion or to support these people throughout their journey. So of course, not just every person who decides I want to be a homeowner qualifies for the program. There's a lot of stringent criteria that goes into place, but it creates a really beautiful opportunity for an investor to be the person who qualifies for the mortgage, puts some money in for the down payment, and then have a relatively hands-off experience, because in many instances, and the way that I teach it is to work with a fantastic rent-to-own company. We've got some big ones here in Ontario and across the country, and that enables the investor to not have to worry about a lot of the elements that we do with the typical rental property. So, you don't have to worry about vacancy, because these people are on the journey to try to buy this house. They're not, taken off in the middle of the night, and any maintenance fees associated with the property. Well, guess what? These tenant buyers who are homeowners in training, well, they're taking care of that.
I like that, right? Homeowner in training. Yeah,
100%, right? Yeah. They have to go in with that mentality. They're allowed to and encouraged to force appreciate the property. You've got a girl and a boy, you want to paint their bedrooms, go ahead. But you can't do that in a typical rental. So it adds a lot of extra security and comfort. So on the investor side, many of the elements that can actually diminish cash flow and your return are in fact just not part of the equation.
Yeah, and I think the rent to own is a great win-win for people too. It's like a kind of ethical way to invest if you want as well too.
There's a really feel-good piece.
Yeah.
You're like, not only am I making more money than a lot of other strategies, nothing wrong with that, but you're also helping a family. And you know, as someone who's done rent to owns on my own, like not necessarily with the company, you know, once every few months, once every 6 months, I'd go into the family's home, and instead of like knocking at the door aggressively and saying I'm here for an inspection, it would be like, hey, can I come by on Saturday afternoon? And I always bring pastries, and we sit at the kitchen table, and the kids tell me about their report cards, and you are actually genuinely involved with the family, and you're bettering their lives. And I even have tenant buyers who have long time ago bought their home, and every Christmas they still send me cards. So
that's
it's
so cool. That's like
experience.
making an honest to goodness difference and a good profit. I think both are wins in that category. You mentioned too how we talked about jumping off the building without a parachute, right? I think the rent to own is an awesome parachute for people to dip their feet into the real estate investment market.
100%. The one caveat that I will put into that is you do have that parachute in place if you're working with an awesome rent-to-own company like Jag Properties or Homeowners Now. Yeah, Jag's our house. Because they have phenomenal systems and a really great job in vetting. If you're going to try and put the entire rent-to-own yourself together with, I got to find a tenant buyer and an investor and a property and all the contracts, it can actually be very, very challenging and a little bit
you can get into that
dangerous.
paralysis too.
Paralysis. There's a lot you need to have in place to protect yourself and the tenant buyer and the investor and all the various moving pieces. So, you know, if you're working with a rent-to-own company, 100% I agree with you. You've got that parachute strapped on tight, and you've got a lot more support than a lot of other strategies.
Yeah, I agree. And seeing on the mortgage broker side, because we've seen a lot of the mom and pop rent-to-own companies, and they thought they were doing a good job, but they didn't build in maybe enough equity component at the end of the day, and then the homeowner or the homeowner in training that was trying to buy the property actually couldn't at the end of the day because they didn't set them up to win. Maybe it was deliberate or not deliberate, but then the investor's not happy at the end of the day because they're not getting the money back and the homeowner's not, if it's not set up correctly at the beginning.
Well, and I'll share with you, this was on a plane ride home about 2 months ago, and I happened to be sitting next to a gentleman who did rent-to-owns, and I was like, what? You do rent-to-owns? And he was like, yeah, they're amazing, you make so much money. And I was like, oh, like, how do you structure them? And he was like, yeah, it doesn't matter if they don't buy the property in the future because then I make even more money, so like, that's the important part. And I was like, stewardess, can you move me to another seat? You know, it's just the intention needs to be to really help somebody in the process.
Yeah, and people have to be careful now because a lot of those companies are popping up now, right? And you don't want to be associated with them. We don't want to be associated with one on the mortgage lending side, and you don't want to be associated with one on the investor side. Because if you get a pissed off tenant at the end of the day or homeowner soon, that could really hurt your investment at the end of the day too.
Absolutely. I mean, there are definitely some opportunities where if they do go sideways, the investor can make more money, but that's really not the point. You make strong returns when you're investing in a rent-to-own. You know, typically you see in the range of 14 to about 20% return a year, and that's a fantastic return, and there's no reason why you can't.
Can we put 14 to 20 on the screen? That's a big return.
And it's funny, a lot of people look at it and be like, is that a scam? Like, you can make 20% return a year. Yeah, you absolutely can, with a lot of safety and security and helping the person acquire a home.
And it's all like, it's the compound and the leverage, right? Like, people, I talk about this all the time when it comes down. You put money into the stock market, you put money into GIC. If you put 100 grand in, you're making interest on 100 grand, but on property, it's leverage. And if you put $100,000 down on 500, you're making 5, 6, 7% on the 5. Your principal's going down, and it's just like, it's like a snowball that just keeps getting bigger the more you do it.
That's why real estate is the best. But you know, when you do some of these more advanced and complex strategies, the returns are that much higher, but there's baked in levels of security that you just can't find with buying a property and renting it out.
Yeah, I think, you know what, I'm an advocate for the rent-to-own program on the borrower side and on the investor side, because you've got someone, at the end of the day, you've got someone that has pride in their home. Right?
100%.
You got someone, you don't have a tenant, because I've got rental properties too, and oh my God, we could do a whole episode on what I've been through, you know, the walk-in meth lab, okay, or this or that or the other. They stole the copper. Like I had someone steal all the copper plumbing out of my rental property one time.
That's crazy.
And I was like, I could have just given you $50. Like, you know what I mean? Well, you could have just left it there.
So here's the analogy I like to use. Okay, I'll run it on you. So if you are driving a rental car and you drive it off the lot and you hit a massive pothole, what are you going to say? It's a rental, right?
Yeah.
Who cares? It's not mine, right? But if you're driving your nice new fancy, are you a car guy?
Now I'm not getting a rental car. Thanks, Limor. I appreciate it. Yeah. Hertz, gone. Yeah.
You're driving your nice fancy new car.
Yep.
And you've, you know, $50,000, $60,000, $100,000, and you've been wanting this thing your whole life, and you drive it off the lot, and you hit a massive pothole. What are you gonna say?
Shit! I'm gonna get out. I'm gonna look at it. I'm gonna jack it up. I'm gonna get a diaper and wipe it with it because I love my car so much. Like, I'm gonna be upset. So
this is
like,
exactly the mentality of someone who is renting one of your properties. They're gonna steal your wires from inside of the wall. Not all of them, but some. Versus someone who has a pride of ownership and is going to own this property in the future. And as an investor, like, oh, that's a dream come true.
Yeah, and that's an amazing analogy of it too. I 100% agree. And anybody that's waiting, jump off, talk to you, and get into it, right? So I think a lot of people talk about private lending as well too, and rent own, because I know you specialize in private lending too. So let's talk a little bit about that. What do you think?
Yeah, so I absolutely love private lending for someone who wants to just kind of dip their toe in the water, wants to start making money, but has no interest in being a landlord. So that's kind of the theme between the two is, okay, let's make your money work hard for you. You live your life. Don't worry about being the landlord with tenants and trash and termites and all that kind of stuff.
Ooh, but the triple threat.
There you go. There you go. There's a fourth one. It's the toilets. No one likes dealing with the leaky toilets. Right. But the whole point is, when you're a private lender, you are actually doing exactly what the banks are doing. You are lending the money from your account. So what's super cool is you can do it in a registered account like an RSP or tax-free savings account, even an RESP. But what that allows you to do is have a guaranteed fixed return that you are going to get. And the nice thing is you go out and you get a mortgage, I don't know, from the Green Bank, let's say. You know, if you have an issue with your property, you're never gonna call them on the weekend and say, hey, there's an issue with the property. It's your responsibility. So when you are the person who's lending the money to another individual, and the way that I teach is one-to-one. So, you know, you need to borrow $50,000 and I've got $50,000. I'm gonna lend it to you. I am registered on title the same way that a traditional bank would be, but the difference is because I'm doing it privately, I'm not getting paid, you know, 2.5%, 3.5%. The returns that you're getting is anywhere from 9 to 15% return per year. And then again, there's no maintenance, there's no vacancy. That amount is actually
no landlord-tenant board.
None of that, none of that. Yeah. It's written in documents in the mortgage, and you know, it's pretty much probably, I don't like to use the G word particularly. You know the one I'm referring to?
Garen Rams with T or something like that.
That one. I get but it's the closest thing that you can get, and you are actually backed the same way by an asset.
Yeah. You know what? We've lent out money as well too, and like your worst case scenarios are very, very limited if it's, again, just like with a rent to own private lending, if it's lent out correctly.
Totally. Right? And so what I like about it is, with lending, less than 1%, and you would know this, less than 1% of mortgages across Canada default. So you're embarking on a strategy, like think about the stock market. How many people lose money in the stock market? I don't even want to
Nobody does. Nobody does.
Nobody loses money in the stock market?
Yeah.
Right. Okay. So with mortgages, less than 1% actually default. Now, if you were to be that one deal that went sideways, luckily you've done some education and due diligence up front, so you know you're only going to be leveraged up to 80%. So there's going to be 20% of equity in there. Then you're also going to do your other homework, like, is it in a sound economic area? Could I rent it out? Could I wholesale it? Could I turn it into a rent to own, right? So that you have a backup to a backup to a backup on a strategy that requires you to be, I don't know, having a good time living your life and completely passive.
Sounds terrible. Yeah. Greg?
So a flat out answer, is there one that's safer than the other? Private lending versus...
I think it's different, because I think, again, if you're with a good company, with a good mentor and a rent-to-own program, or conversely with a good mortgage broker that's put you into a good private lending deal, I think the risk could probably be very similar. it's, if you're with like a private lend could go bad if you get a bad advice from a mortgage broker that says, like Limor said, you don't want to go up to more than 80% loan to value when you're lending. But if someone were to say, hey, this is a great opportunity, you can make 20%, but we're going to give you 95% loan to value on the house, your risk is really high there, because if something goes wrong, you only have a 5% difference there.
Yeah, and the other thing that I would say is that both of these strategies, you know, you're not going to do them at your traditional bank, right? You are now the decision maker, you are the investor, and the level of risk or lack of security, and sort of to use your words, is more if you as the person who's lending your money don't know what you're doing. So even though it's like, oh, here's a great rent-to-own company, if you don't know that their deal is a good deal or not a good deal for you personally, it can go wrong or it can go bad. And that's where I find it, probably you've seen this as well with private lending. You know, I have a lot of mortgage broker friends saying to me, it's kind of awkward, like I have someone who really wants to make 15% on their money, and they say to me, is this a good deal? But they have no idea. And I'm like, well, it's a good deal, I put it together, but that doesn't mean it's a good deal for you. And so that's where I think, regardless of which strategy you're going to go, if you're going to use an amazing mortgage broker or an amazing rent-to-own company, you as the investor have to understand the ins and outs of the strategy so you can determine whether or not a specific deal is a good fit for you.
Yeah, I think when you start to have a risk analysis done, right? Know what your risk profile is. Like, do you need the money in a year? Do you need the money in 5 years? Do you need the money in 10 years? If you're investing with your RSP and you're in your early 40s, and you don't need it till you're 65.
Meh.
Yeah, then you can maybe take on a little bit more risk because you've got a 20, 25 year time horizon.
Yes, but I do have to say Warren Buffett's rule number 1 is don't lose money, and rule number 2 is see rule number 1. So.
Love it. Totally. Very, very true. He is a wise man. He's done all right for himself.
Totally. And then you and I were also talking about, you called it the sleep insurance. And I talk about like, if you can't sleep at night, if you're going to do this deal, if you think like the deal is a 2-year deal or a 1-year deal or a 3-year deal, if you think that, you know, any time throughout that duration, you're going to be lying awake at night, staring up at the ceiling, worrying about this investment, like, you don't need to do it.
What do you think about leveraging to invest in private mortgages? So, you know, a lot of people now, home prices have gone up 10, 15, 20% over several years, right? So we get a lot of people that might have $200,000, $300,000, $400,000 equity in their home. And they're saying, you know what, should I private lend? Should I take out a line of credit at 3.5, 3.7, talk to Limor, and lend it out at 10 or 12 and make my hedge just like the bank does? What do you think about that?
Yeah, so I'm a big fan of using other people's money, and when you take that money out of a home equity line of credit, that's exactly what you're doing. I mean, you're borrowing kind of from yourself, but you know, I would just say you want to make sure that there's enough room in the spread. So if you are borrowing the money from your home equity line of credit and you have to pay, let's say, 4% interest, and you get a deal and it's 9% and there's 5% in there, if you're comfortable with that, you know, especially if you're in a situation where if a deal were to go sideways, could you continue to pay the payments on the home equity line of credit for a short period of time? You know, the other thing I would say in that situation, if you can qualify for a mortgage, go the rent to own route as an investor, because then your returns are far higher and you've got even more of a spread. But yeah,
I like that.
Borrow the money, you know, as long as you're not over leveraged.
And I think everybody's risk tolerance is different. And I always call it, you know, you have working capital and then you have worked capital. If you're not using your equity, it's worked.
Yeah.
And you want to put it to work, right? Because I firmly believe that banks have made billions of dollars doing this on small spreads. They pay you 0.1% on your savings account, right? And then we're all tickled pink when we get 2% on a GIC and we're like, woo, right? But
well, and the other piece of the puzzle with that is, you know, working with a really good accountant, because sometimes you can expense some of that interest if you do it the right way, and then you're like, wow, then it's even better.
Yeah, and I think you brought up a good point too, because it's always good to talk to a tax advisor, strategist, because you may think you're making 4%, you may think you're making 5%, but if you're in a high tax bracket paying 50 cents on every dollar, you got to incorporate that too, because I always talk about it's what's left in your pocket. It's not what your gross income is, it's your net income. So
it's true,
something to consider.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I didn't know how we got on this tax road, but I do say, this is my fault, okay?
Yeah.
Is that, you know, sometimes people are like so concerned about how much tax they're going to pay. I'm like, if you make 2%, you have to pay tax. If you make 20%, you have to pay tax. So would you rather make 2? Would you rather make 20?
No, right? For sure.
Make that decision
totally.
As we go.
Yeah, awesome. So you know what? How would people? So tell everybody about, because we were talking before we started here about your coaching program, what you do, and you have an amazing accountability and performance with your program. So why don't you tell everybody about that? 'Cause it's pretty cool.
Yeah. So you know, the way that I run my coaching, and I'm very proud of, the two main strategies that I teach are both rent to own and private lending. And you know, we pick one and we start with it based on who you are, your financial goals, whether you can qualify for a mortgage. And what I do is I teach the strategy over 6 one-hour sessions over Zoom, and you understand all the ins and outs, how to crunch the numbers, what are the legal components, what are the contracts, how do we evaluate worst case scenario, all that kind of good stuff. And every single week you get a live deal to review for homework. And what's neat is, and you know, they're all cartoon characters, so we're doing Daisy Duck this week and we're doing Mickey Mouse next week, but you have to come back for the next session and say what you like about the deal, what you don't like about the deal. I answer any questions you have, and then I force you to make a decision. And you'd be surprised at how many people struggle to make a decision with monopoly money.
Really? Like they won't even, they'll be like, I don't know if I can invest in this or not.
But you know what, it's really good training, because then all of a sudden you're doing a live deal and you had here's $100,000, so you have that experience. So, and then at the end of the 6 sessions, I become your mentor on speed dial as you're doing your first deal. So it's very much the theory with live deals baked in, followed by my support as you do your very first deal.
And what's your conversion rate for people that have done it, and like who signed up for your program and actually done a deal? Because we were talking before, there's tons of coaching programs. I think we're overwhelmed with information, motivation, positivity, lots of these things, right, that are good nuggets, but you have something very special with yours, which I think is cool.
Yeah, thank you. I'm continuing to operate at 100% success rate.
That's awesome.
So all of my investors who go through my program have gotten into at least the first deal. Some of them are crazy. They're in like their 4th or 5th within like 6 months. But you know, part of the reason why that happens is because when I'm working with people up front and exploring the options of working together, there's an element of partnership. And if I feel that the individual isn't going to work well with me, they're not necessarily open-minded, they're not in a position where, like, you know, they see all the negative and everything. I've had people that I've just said, you know, I'm terribly sorry, you've got a bright future ahead of you, but it's not working with me.
Well, what I really appreciate and love about what you do is because we share the same values. I think people investing in real estate, whether it's rent to own, private lending, buying real estate, as long as you got the right strategy, do it, right?
Yeah.
I say it till I'm blue in the face, but I've got a biased opinion because I get a commission. Okay? But the reality is, right?
So I do not.
I know, and that's what I love about it, because you know, we tell people at Mission 35, you know, we think investing in private is the way to go, we think private lending is the way to go, but for someone like you to go out and teach it and coach it and have 100% flow through accountability to that with no remuneration elsewhere is really important. So
yeah, so there's, I mean, a flat investment to be able to work with me up front, but my clients are seeing an exceptional return on investment on their investment with working with me. And I think one of the reasons why it works so well is because they know they can call me and email me, text me as many times throughout the deal, and you know, no offense to you, but like, they don't have a mortgage broker or a realtor or a lawyer or someone who's going to get paid on them doing that transaction. And you know, hopefully most people operate with integrity and want what's best for their client. But I am completely third party and unbiased because, you know, you've invested in me to educate you so that you're empowered. And I say to my clients all the time, like, if you want to do the deal, do it. If you don't want to do it, it makes no difference to me if you do the deal or you don't, but I'm here to support you in the deal that's right for you, and that's why I'm educating them on how to make the decision themselves. And
once you find with a lot of your clients that do one deal, they're going on and doing another deal and another deal and another deal now because
and then they're likely more, what other strategies do you have? Because, you know, here they are, they've come off the street, you know, within a few months, typically, if there's a deal that comes up that meets their criteria, you know, their money's working hard for them. They haven't gone through a process where they've like, we're drinking from the fire hose, so much information, didn't know where to start, couldn't connect the dots between, oh my God, I've learned this great stuff, but am I going to make a mistake now that I'm actually putting my money to work?
Yeah, you know what? And I've seen companies that spend $20,000, you mentioned it before, to buy your first home. And I think, you know, a lot of us have seen these programs and seen them before, and it's like, man, I've seen tons of clients spend $20,000 on a program and not do anything with it.
Yeah.
Right? And you really just need to get your feet wet and do it. So good job on that.
Yeah,
so
thank you.
we're going to wrap up now. I just want to say thank you so much, Limor, for coming in.
Yeah,
thanks for making everybody financially fabulous. Okay.
That's the goal.
And I've got a gift for you. This comes
No way.
from a gentleman from a faraway city called Burlington. Okay. And he,
I drove through that city.
Yeah, he handcrafted it in his own garage.
No way.
Okay.
That's
and
awesome.
it's for you. It kind of looks like a telephone.
I was going to say, is it a phone?
Yeah, it's to call me if you need something, okay? Anyway, thank you so much, guys.
Thank you so much.
Big 5 or 6.